There's a moment most people have had at least once. You're lying in bed, the room is dark, everything is quiet. And out of nowhere, a thought arrives that you didn't invite. Not a worry about tomorrow, not a memory from yesterday. Something older, something stranger. You suddenly become aware that you exist, that there is something here, in this body, in this moment, experiencing the fact of being alive. And then the thought goes further. Why? Why is there anything at all? Why is there a universe to lie in? Why are there beds and rooms and darkness and minds that can even ask these questions? Why is there something instead of nothing? And then, just as quickly as it arrived, you push it away. You check your phone. You think about tomorrow. You go to sleep. But here's what no one tells you. That question you just buried, it might be the most important thing you've ever felt. Not because it has a cosmic answer, but because of why you felt compelled to ask it in the first place. Because here's the thing. Philosophers have chased that question for thousands of years. Physicists have built entire theories around it. And after all of that, after quantum mechanics and multiverse theory and mathematical cosmology, we're not actually closer to an answer. The universe has stayed completely silent. So what if we've been asking the wrong subject? What if the question, why does anything exist, was never really about the universe at all? Let's start with something strange. Think about when people actually ask this question. Not in philosophy classrooms, not in research papers. Think about the real moments. Teenagers lying awake at 3 a.m. People sitting alone after a loss. Someone in the middle of a depressive episode, staring at the ceiling. Someone who just got a diagnosis they weren't expecting. Someone who watched a person they loved disappear. That's when this question shows up. Not during a calm Tuesday afternoon. Not in a moment of contentment. It arrives in the dark. It arrives when something has cracked open. That pattern is not a coincidence. We've been treating why does anything exist like it's a question about physics. Like if we just had a powerful enough telescope or a clever enough equation, we'd finally see the answer written somewhere out there in the fabric of space-time. But what if that's exactly backwards? What if the question doesn't point outward at all? What if it points directly back at the person asking it? Here's what we're actually going to explore. The idea that this great cosmic question, one of the oldest and most haunting in all of human thought, is, at its core, an emotional question wearing a philosophical mask. And that what it's really asking has nothing to do with quantum fields or the origin of the universe. It's asking something far more personal and far more frightening. Think about the last time you felt truly certain that your life mattered. Not in an abstract sense, concretely. That the specific fact of you being alive in this particular body, with these particular memories and fears and hopes, that it meant something. That it was not random. That it was not temporary in a way that made it meaningless. Hold that feeling, or the absence of it. Now ask yourself, when that certainty goes missing, what fills the space? Usually it's a version of the same question. Why is there anything? Because what we're really asking is, why am I here? And underneath that, does it matter that I'm here? And underneath even that, the question we almost never say out loud, what happens when I'm not? These are not cosmological questions. These are existential ones. And they're terrifying. So terrifying that across human history, we have developed extraordinary ways to avoid sitting with them directly. We've built religions. We've built philosophies. We've built science. Not always to find the truth. Sometimes just to have somewhere to aim the question that isn't directly at ourselves. Pointing the question at the universe is one of the most elegant redirections ever invented. It takes something unbearably personal and makes it feel abstract. It takes something about you and makes it feel like it's about everything. The dread gets laundered through metaphysics and comes out looking like intellectual curiosity. But the dread is still there. You can feel it in the question. That slight vertigo. That particular flavor of unease. That's not what pure intellectual curiosity feels like. That's what fear feels like when it's wearing a disguise. Now here's where it gets stranger. This isn't unique to modern humans lying awake with smartphones. This pattern runs through the entire recorded history of human thought. The earliest philosophers weren't asking about the universe because they were bored. They were surrounded by death, by disease, by the complete absence of the explanations we take for granted. They asked, why does anything exist? In the same breath as, why do people die? And where do we go? And what are we supposed to do while we're here? The cosmic question and the personal question were never really separate. They were the same question, asked from two different angles. And when you look at the history of every civilization that has ever existed, you find the same thing. Every culture, without exception, has constructed some story about why there is something rather than nothing. Creation myths, divine origins, eternal cycles, mathematical absolutes. Every single one of them does the same job. They take the terror of contingency, the fact that everything, including you, could so easily not exist, and they wrap it in a narrative. They give it a reason. They make it feel less arbitrary. We call the modern version of this cosmology, but the function is the same. So let's sit with that for a moment, because there's something deeply uncomfortable here. If this question is fundamentally emotional, if it's really about fear rather than physics, then no scientific discovery will ever satisfy it. And we know this is true because none of them have. Every time physics produces a new theory about the origin of the universe, the question just retreats one step further back. But what caused that? But what existed before that? But why those laws and not others? The question doesn't close. It recedes. It always opens another door. Not because there are infinite doors in the universe, but because the thing driving the question isn't curiosity. It's anxiety. And anxiety doesn't stop when you find an answer. It just finds a new question. Think about that. We have people who have spent their entire lives studying the deepest structures of reality. Physicists, cosmologists, philosophers. And to a person, the question of why anything exists remains completely open. No one has even made a dent in it. The universe has offered nothing. But here's the strange implication of that. What if the universe's silence isn't a failure of our science? What if the universe is silent on this question, because the universe is simply not who the question is addressed to? You're walking through a forest alone at night. The trees are black against a dark sky. You hear a sound you can't identify, and before you can stop yourself, you ask, is someone there? That question is not about the forest. It's about you, your vulnerability, your smallness, the fact that something could happen to you and no one would know. Why does anything exist? Works the same way. It sounds like it's aimed outward, but the anxiety in it, the vertiginous pull of it, is entirely about the person asking, about the strangeness of being a temporary, conscious thing in a universe that doesn't appear to notice you're here. Which means the question is actually pointing us somewhere extremely precise. Not toward physics, not toward mathematics, toward the experience of being a conscious creature who knows it will die. That's the raw nerve. Not the existence of the universe, the existence of you, and the fact that it ends. Now here's where the rabbit hole goes somewhere unexpected. Because once you see the question this way, something shifts. The failure to answer it stops feeling like a limitation of science and starts feeling like a misaddressed letter. All this time, we've been sending the question to the universe. But the universe doesn't process mail. It doesn't have an inbox. It doesn't care. The only thing that can receive this question is a conscious mind. and the only conscious mind that can actually do anything with the answer is yours. This isn't a retreat from the question, it's a reorientation. The question, why does anything exist, stops being something you aim outward and wait for an echo. It becomes something you aim inward. And when you do that, it changes entirely. It stops asking for a metaphysical explanation. It starts asking for something more honest. What do I do with the fact that I'm here? What do I make of this? What matters, given that everything is temporary, including me? Those questions are answerable, not with equations, not with theories, with choices, with attention, with the way you move through a life that is, in every sense of the word, unrepeatable. But here's the part I don't want you to walk away from too quickly, because there's a version of everything I just said that becomes its own kind of escape, a way of domesticating the question, turning it into self-help, making it manageable. And I think that would be a mistake, because even if the emotional engine driving the question is fear, even if the real subject is you and not the cosmos, the question still exists, and it still has no answer. And that silence is real. Why is there something rather than nothing? We genuinely don't know. We don't know if that question even has an answer. We don't know if it's the kind of question that can be answered, or whether asking it is a bit like asking what color Wednesday is. We don't know if the framework of why, cause, reason, explanation, even applies to the existence of everything. And that somehow is its own kind of revelation. Because think about what it means that we are the kind of beings who ask unanswerable questions. Not every animal does this. As far as we can tell, nothing else on this planet lies awake, wondering why the universe exists. Something about the particular shape of human consciousness, its ability to step outside itself, to imagine its own non-existence, to sense the sheer improbability of being here, produces this question as a kind of exhaust, a byproduct, a symptom. We are the universe asking about itself. That's not a metaphor. That's literally what's happening when you lie in the dark and feel that vertigo. 13 billion years of matter organizing itself has produced, in you, a thing that can look back at all of it and ask why. And the answer, if there is one, might not be somewhere out in the cosmos. It might be located exactly here, in the asking, in the fact that something exists that cares enough about its own existence to feel disturbed by its contingency. Maybe the universe doesn't have a reason for existing, but you have a reason for asking. And that distinction, small as it sounds, might be the only honest ground we have to stand on. If the mysteries of existence, consciousness, and reality are what pull you deeper, consider subscribing to Cosmora. There are still layers left to uncover, questions that don't resolve, only expand. And that's exactly where we're going next. But before you go, sit with this one last thing. If this question is really about fear, about the terror of being temporary, then what does it mean that we can't stop asking it? We've had thousands of years, thousands of thinkers, every tradition, every civilization, every era of science. And the question remains, fresh, unresolved, just as vertiginous as the first time someone felt it. Maybe we keep asking because we're afraid. Or maybe, and this is the part that should keep you up at night, maybe we keep asking because somewhere, in a way we can't quite articulate, we already know the answer isn't out there. And we're not ready to look where it actually is.